Welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're good and enjoying your fishing, whatever it may be. After a long break, I sat down and tied 3 or 4 flies for the first time in over 3 years, and amazingly, I caught some fish on them just the other day. You'll see I'm segueing perfectly into my guest for today, Barry Ord Clarke, who is here to talk fly fishing, tying, and his new book, The Featherbender's Advanced Fly Tying Techniques. Barry, welcome back to the podcast. Are you well?
Thank you very much, Pete. Yes, and I'm very well.
I'm pleased to hear that. What have you been up to?
A lot of work, really. I had a Norwegian book come out last year, which was a huge book, over 400 pages, 100 different patterns, step by step, all with a QR code, published in Norwegian. And that is currently under translation for both Danish and Finnish. And I had just last week, my new English book out, the Featherbender's Advanced Fly Tying Techniques, which is kind of volume 2 from the Fly Tying Techniques book. Yeah, that has done really well, actually.
And for listeners who haven't heard the previous podcasts we've done, Barry is based in Norway, and it's worth listening, scrolling down and finding, if you've not listened to the original podcasts we did, you'll hear why he's based in Norway as well. And that's worth a listen as well. So then you'll get a bit of a backstory to that. But I know we'd been talking for a little while recently, and you said you'd been busy with books and stuff. Does that mean that gets in the way of your fishing life?
Well, this is how I make my living, photographing, tying, shows, books, demos, YouTube channel, website. So even though it is fishing related, it gets in the way of fishing like anything else does. I mean, the ideal lifestyle would be one of fishing whenever you liked, wherever you liked. But unfortunately, work always gets in the way. But it's work that I'm very passionate about, and I'm lucky enough to have my long-time hobby and passion as a full-time job, and managed to make it work.
And that's a fascinating rabbit hole to go down, isn't it? Because people dream of working in fishing in some way, shape or form. And it can be a difficult and dangerous path to go down, can't it? Turning your passion into your day job.
Sure. A lot of my mates say, "Oh, you've got the best job in the world." And I believe most of the time I have. But it does reflect on your fishing, your hobby, your passion, because once all that becomes a job and you have to earn money from it, and if you don't work and no money comes in, then it becomes tiresome and a bit of a millstone. But you have to try and keep it sweet. I started when I moved to Norway. I started doing both hunting and fishing because I was very, very passionate for many decades about hunting, especially big game hunting for European game, moose, red deer, reindeer. And I quickly discovered that was impossible for me to do, because I was working more than I was. Even when I was hunting, I wasn't hunting. I had a camera with me. And I was taking pictures more than I was doing what I loved. So I stopped that totally. I decided that I was not going to do any more hunting photography or writing or anything. But since then, I've stopped hunting. I've done my 40 years of hunting, and I'm very satisfied with it. And I've kind of hung up the guns. But with the fishing, it's a very fine balance between keeping it fun and work at the same time.
And was it a conscious decision to give up hunting? Was it just something you decided that was time to focus just purely on the fishing and the photography and the writing down that avenue?
No, it was a few different reasons. My daughter and her family she grew up with me hunting, and we more or less ate only game at home. So it was all good meat. I don't like processed food at all. I'm very conscious about what I eat. And my daughter's family all became vegetarians, and they have been now for 3 years. So I decided that I would cut out the hunting as well. And the first year was difficult. When the dates came around for me, I could feel it. But now everything's cool, everything's good, and I've done more hunting than most people get to do in a lifetime or 2 lifetimes. So I'm quite happy with it.
And you touched on something very interesting there, and in a minute way, I've examined it a little bit as well. The difficulty of, let's use fishing as the example. I know you talked about hunting as well, but I guess that went into fishing as well. Taking a camera along and either photography or fishing, the two of them, it's very hard to mix the two, isn't it? Did you find that you had to make a conscious decision, say, right, I'm on this, but I'm going to just photograph, or could you creep some fishing into it as well?
The most difficult time I experienced that was when I was working for magazines. At the height of my magazine work, I was delivering articles to 20 magazines plus every single month, all over the globe. And I was very lucky. I've been privileged in order that these magazines have sent me to over 40 different countries, lots of different styles of fishing. And I always tried to put the professional side first, which I always did. So I would say, I'm going to spend the first 4 or 5 days fishing, so I can get, without any fishing, just photographing, so I can get all the images I need. And if I'm happy with what I've got, then maybe I can fish a day or two at the end of the trip. So I always played by that rule, really. But since I stopped working for magazines, I still do work for magazines, but now I only do like 3 or 4 articles a month. So that's a huge drop in the amount of work. But now when I'm fishing, I can decide myself. I'm only looking for cameo images. I'm not looking for images, journalistic images for a travel log or to tell a story of a destination or a style of fishing. So that's a huge relief on me enjoying fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you say some fascinating things to me as well, because you talk about the magazine marketplace, and you must have seen it from the heydays to the contraction. That's been quite some change, hasn't it?
Sure, absolutely. And that was I think we touched on this before, that was my reason for going more towards online articles and videos than the printed matter, because as soon as these magazines, as I said, over 20 articles a month I was delivering, and now it's only 3 or 4. So that just tells you how those magazines have come off the shelves, really. A lot of them have just disappeared. And as they were disappearing, the the fee for an article was also disappearing. It was getting less and less, and I found that in the end, I had to publish an article in 3 different magazines in order for it to pay for itself. So, but I'm quite happy with that, as I say, because it's released my fishing again.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I recently realised that Fly Culture is coming up 6 years old, and I think you've done 3 of our covers for that were extremely striking: the chartail, the mayflies, and the salmon fly. And they've been, I know, incredibly popular, and I'm pleased that you're still a small part, certainly, of our little world. I'm thrilled about that.
Well, that's lovely, and I very much appreciate the magazine. It's a lovely piece of a publication, and it's those cameo images that I look for now, instead of going down the proverbial line of a man playing a fish, a man releasing a fish, a man smiling. So I'm just pleased to get away from that. So I have a camera with me all the time when I'm fishing. But if I see that cameo image, that's what I look for. And I'm not going after that playing a fish, the big fish. Yeah. So that's a nice different angle on it for me.
Yeah, and that fits perfectly with us as well. I like the more different or cameo, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But I wanted to move on a little bit. And have you been busy with shows this year? Have you been tying at events?
Yeah, I have been tying at events, and I have the big show coming up in November, which is the Fly Tying Symposium in New Jersey, New York. It's a 2-day show, but it's the biggest fly tying show that is just dedicated to fly tying, nothing else. And it's a great show. Some of the world's best tyers there, and it's a show that I love doing. And the day after the show finishes, I'm off fishing striped bass. So that's a nice little day off.
And they're an amazing fish to catch, aren't they? They're sort of one that I've honed in on a little bit over the years, but never got to do anything about. But that's special fishing, right?
Yeah, it is. I've not done it before. And Chuck, who runs the fly fishing show, the symposium, he contacted me a week or so ago, and he said, "Barry, we've got a great opportunity. All the elements are in the right place. It's full moon and everything. And we've got a chance to go out on a boat with the best skipper. And do you want to do it?" And I said, "Of course I want to do it." Yeah. So yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun because the show is very busy. I have under the 2 days, I've got 2 tying classes of 10 people each class. I've got a fly tying seminar, and I've got a featured fly tyer spot, and 2 book signings. So it's the 2 days just fly by. And the day before the show, I'm doing a demo at the Maine Fly Tyers Association in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that fishing's going to be a nice little breather for you by the sound of it. And I was thinking of the shows here, like the BFFI, obviously, for example. And I always wonder about these things. Do you get the chance to actually tie when people are watching? Or do you get bombarded with questions from people watching you at work?
You get bombarded by people asking you questions. I think some shows like BFFI and the Symposium, the big shows, when you're actually sat talking to visitors or trying to tie for visitors, you don't really tie anything. Oh, I don't, unless I sit and tie, but then somebody will come along. I'll be halfway through a fly, and somebody will come along and say, "Can you show me how to do this, or can you tie one of these for me?" And I do that, of course, but otherwise, you don't get much tied at all.
Yeah. So what are numbers of those? Is it like 2 flies or 0 or
Oh
just
no,
some
no,
hook?
no, no! I tie 4 or 5 dozen
Oh, right. Wow.
over a weekend, but it's nothing into comparison what I would do if I was tying. Yeah.
And when you pack for an event, then, do you have an idea of what you might tie? Do you have a plan in your mind? Do you like to mix it up for you as well? Or do you sort of just go with the flow and grab some stuff out of the bag and start tying?
No, I have a very strict regime and bag that I pack. I see other tyres coming to shows and they've got boxes and boxes on trolleys on golf carts, and I mean I just can't believe that I do about 20 shows a year for the past 30 years, so I know what I'm taking now, and I take. I don't know if you know the Petit Jean fly tying bag.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I have that with me. Nothing else. So there's no. I don't take capes. I take feathers or hackles. I know exactly what I'm going to tie, and if I'm doing classes, I prepare bags for every person that is in the class for each pattern we're going to tie. With the right amount of materials, hooks, everything. So those are just divided out. So yeah, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And then somebody will come along and they'll say, "Oh, can you tie me a bibio with a palmered hackle?" I just have to say, "I'm sorry, I don't have those materials with me." And I don't have them with me. I say, "I can show you a palmered hackle, but I can't show you a bibio with a palmered hackle." So it's, but when I first started doing shows, I was taking so much stuff with me. And when you're there tying, you can never find it in your bag.
Yeah.
But my bag is completely and totally organised. I keep my station clean. I know what I'm tying. I know where everything is. So that works for me now.
That's nice. That sounds almost chef-like.
Well, I am more than OCD. And lots of fly tyers will know that even when they've left the show at the end of the day, I will clean their stations at each side of them. So I like everything tidy and neat and in its place. I always have one of those rolling things with me, you know, that you buy at IKEA that take fluff off your clothes. So I run that over to remove all the deer hair and bits and pieces, and yeah.
They must love you afterwards as well. They'd be very, very happy about that.
I get a lot of stick from it.
Yeah, I think that's
Being so
wonderful.
tidy and clean and cleaning other people's stations.
That's exactly the opposite to me. So it's
I
thrilling
did a
to hear
show
that.
2 years ago in Italy, and when I came back from lunch, I think there was 44 beer bottles on my table. Somebody had very kindly placed there.
I bet they were cleared away very, very quickly.
Oh, I know who it was. They had to be British.
That sounds like quite a heavy lunch as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you are tying at these, are you tying to fill your boxes then as well? Is that an opportunity to say, right, well, I need some
Absolutely not. I don't come home with any flies from any shows. If I tie a fly, I give it away. If somebody asks me to show them a fly to tie, I give it away.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, that's fantastic. And how are the shows looking from a numbers of attendees and age group? Do you make, because where you are from these lofty positions, you must get a very good look at who's wandering round. And are you detecting anything from what you see while you're sitting at these shows?
The shows are getting busier and busier. That is for sure, absolutely. And there's a growing interest in not only fly fishing but fly tying, and that's great. And I also love that fly tyers are buying books, even though everything is available online now. That they are still buying books, but of course the age group, I would say, and gender is men. The largest one is men between 50 and 75. So we have some work to do in order to recruit younger people and secure the future of fly tying. But there are lots of very enthusiastic and very good tyers who are, still in their teens. So it's looking good. I think the shows are doing better than ever before, I believe.
That's wonderful to hear. And, I use BFFI as an example, and I think that's become almost a social event as well now, hasn't it, to kick off the season for people?
Absolutely. It's normally the second week in February. I'm not doing it next year because the same weekend I'm doing a show in Italy, in Rimini, and the choice of Rimini against Northern England is it's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, I'd be with you on that. A small part of my heart, I think, is forever in Italy and the fishing and the culture there as well. And these shows that you attend, do you notice, because there's places that certainly in the UK we know and are aware of as fishing destinations, but I always get the sense, as we've talked about, Italy, Germany, other sorts of venues. Do you detect where there is the busiest to you, and the fly fishing and fly tying culture is greater? Do you feel that anywhere, or is it pretty across the board?
I would say it's fly tyers and fly fishermen are as enthusiastic as anywhere else wherever you meet them. I would say in general. There are some shows that are busier than others, but I think that's because of the location. But I would say perhaps the United States are, and BFFI, of course, is a great show, and it's central England, so it's accessible to a great part of the UK. It's a big show, lots of visitors, lots of exhibitors, tons of fly tyers from all over Europe. So shows are good. And if any of your listeners have not been to one of these shows, they must go to one. And if they're in the UK, I would say BFFI for sure. If Germany, it's EWF that is the big show, and that is also that's probably the most professional show run. It's a fabulous show in a great location, great people, lots of visitors. And these shows vary from country to country and place to place. Very, very different culturally. But they're really worth visiting. If you have an interest in fly fishing or fly tying, you must try and get to a day at least to one of these shows because there's so much stuff there. You're like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah. And for somebody who visits so many places, and of course we have people listening in a lot of places to this podcast, those cultures, and if we look at where you're based, for example, in Norway, comparable to the UK, and you talked about the age group there as well, and I get the sense, and I fish in Denmark a little bit, and I've just tied up to go back over there in November and go see if I can find some sea trout, my friend Ray, that I get the sense Scandinavia, the age group that you were talking about previously, is a little bit lower there. Would I be right in thinking
It's
that?
much lower.
Mm.
It's very much lower, and there's a there's a vast amount of very young, very talented fly tyers in Scandinavia. So it is a different culture for it, absolutely. And most of the people, it's very seldom now that I meet an elderly fly fisher, especially on the coast. If you're salmon fishing, you will, because that's culturally again, that's something that for the elderly, if I can put it that way.
Why do you think that is, though, Barry?
I think salmon fishing is something that you have to grow up with, and it's become more and more expensive, even here, and it takes much more time. You have to have accommodation, licenses, fees, meals, travel, and in many on many rivers here, you also have to enter a lottery. So it's and of course with sea track fishing, brown trout fishing, which most of it in Norway is free. You can do it after school or before school or during school, if you will. But I'm very impressed with the amount of young fly tyers here and fly fishermen who are unbelievably experienced and passionate.
And is that like, I've always thought the comparison between Scandinavia and the US is a lot closer than Scandinavia and the UK.
Yes, absolutely. Why? I don't know. Perhaps they've been influenced by that market through decades of fly tying videos when they were on VHS, and fly tying and fly fishing books. And Norway has an incredible casting environment for fly casting and for fixed reel spin bait casting. There's lots of people that just cast and don't fish at all, and they meet every week. And that again I believe has come from the United States. There is a much stronger connection, or there has been, with the United States and Norway when it comes to fly fishing and fly tying. We had a fantastic little shop. It still exists. It was called Jarl and Bjørnar's Fluefiskebutikk. And in the early 90s, they did this. It's a tiny shop. It's, 15 square meters. But it's just fly fishing and fly tying. And it was the shop in Norway in the 90s. And these two, Jarle and Bjørnar, they had these autumn fly tying symposiums, you could call them. And they invited people like Gary Borger, Gary LaFontaine, Jack Garside, Phil Camara, all these great American tyers coming to Little Norway and sitting and tying flies. And some, this was meeting all these great tyers in the early 90s was just absolutely fantastic. And that was also very strong. There was nobody else. There wasn't, other tyers coming. This was just this complete, unique American tying, and it happened, more or less every year. And Jarle has now gone on to he started Fly Fish Europe,
Ah,
So it's Yarland now that is Fly Fish Europe. So and that's 30 years ago. So there is that connection with the United States. So a lot of the fly tying and casting and has come from those roots. But of course, they do, fly fishers here still recognise and fly ties the roots to the UK also. I have two friends that live not far from me here, and we're all members of the Fly Fishers Club in London. So I met him actually yesterday, one of them. So it's and they absolutely adore that culture of fly fishing, and especially the English side of the culture, where they can go to the club and talk fly fishing with in those wonderful surroundings.
nice. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I was thinking about what you said about getting the well-known American people over, and whether that sowed seeds with people that have been passed down to other anglers there, that and then has spread out more so that link has been a little bit closer. And that's a wonderful legacy if that's how it's happened as well, isn't it?
Sure, of course, absolutely. But that's how it happens, isn't it? But it can go the other way as well. I don't know if you've seen Mark Petitjean's book, CDC. But in that, Mark tells a little story in the opening chapters that is, if I remember correctly, it's called "The Man Who Said No." And it was Mark was visiting. This was before Mark was Mark Petitjean. This is before he started fly fishing, really, or in its very early stages. And Mark was at a club in Switzerland where he was some famous tyer. Mark doesn't tell you in the book who he was, but he was visiting the club and demonstrating fly tying. Mark had never tied a fly before in his life. And Mark stood and studied him as he does, and takes in all details and takes notes and makes drawings. And Mark asked him if he could show him a specific technique. And his answer was quite abrupt and quite easily understood. And he said, no. And Mark thought, well, if you're not going to show it me, I'll work my own technique out. And that was it. And 2 years later, Mark was tying 5,000 flies a year.
Inspiration sometimes comes in different forms and in different ways, doesn't it? And
Most certainly.
yeah, and he can look back and smile a little bit about that. Before we just move on to the book, there was something else that you said there, and about the gentlemen setting up Fly Fish Europe who have gone on to great and wonderful things. The shop culture, and I was thinking that Stuart Hooley very quietly just shut down Fly Only. And I just wondered if the shop fraternity is still in place in Norway as well. Do you see that? Because again, we can talk about America, and you walk into a store, it's going to be busy. The guys behind the desk, where you fishing, what are you up to, that sort of thing. How's that comparable in Norway or Scandinavia as a whole?
We still have shops here, specialist shops. We have 2 or 3 specialist shops just dealing in fly fishing. But we also have just 40 minutes drive from where I live here in the south, probably the biggest tackle shop in the whole of Europe, which is Skitfiska. And I mean, it's enormous. It's huge, but they cover all. They have a huge fly fishing department, fly tying department, but they cover all types of fishing. But again, it's mostly mail order, so it's online. They have a physical shop, but it's kind of this. It's exactly the same what has happened with food shops. Before, you had specialist shops like butchers and fishmongers. We don't have those here anymore, really. in Norway. Everything has gone into big stores. And when you had these small shops, as with small tackle shops, you had people who worked there who were incredibly knowledgeable. And their knowledge was worth its weight in gold. If you had questions on tackle or tying or fishing, was fabulous. And now that they've gone into these huge mega stores, it's kind of lost that personal service and that knowledge, which is a real shame. When you go to the supermarket now and you want a decent cut of meat or fish, you've got a young person behind the in the fish department who doesn't know a prawn from a lobster. So all they're there to do is cheap labour and sell you goods without knowing what they are that they're selling. And unfortunately, a lot of the big stores, you've got all these huge sports shops here like XXL and Sport Max, and they have a fishing department, but nobody knows anything about fishing. They're all sales orientated and they're nothing to do with the sport. But fortunately, in the United States again, that is still there.
Yeah.
Because you've got all these great fishing destinations. And you still find it in the UK at specific fishing destinations, like Stockbridge, up in Scotland. You still have these great shops where they know their local fishing, they know their tackle and tactics. And now all that is really, really important if you're visiting a place, especially for the first time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I hope that we're able to support those and that we do have these boutique, smaller outfits that, like Barry said, give information. You may pay a tiny bit more, but you're getting a whole lot more for a result of that. So I will continue to shout for those, and I'm sure we'll continue to do our little events at fly stores and get people along. And I'm going to look at some more for back end of this year, possibly next as well, and get people and the communities around fly stores going. So fingers crossed for that. Let's move on to the book. And I'd like to start, as I always like to be very transparent about these things, that Barry and I have been talking for quite some time. I knew the book was on its way, and I said, well, let me know when it's out and we'll have a chat about it. So I've invited Barry along to the podcast to tell us about it. I think it's an important book. I think it's a great book, having seen it as well. So I think it's going to help us. And coming into autumn/winter, we've got something to look at and to inspire. And as Barry said, there is, and somebody who publishes a magazine as well, that there is nothing like holding something that you can use as a reference. And you mentioned Gary Borger earlier, and I remember Jason's casting book that I would take outside and look at the casts. And for me, there's nothing better than that. Yes, videos are fantastic, but I like having it right next to me that I can have a look at. And I know you've hybridized that a little bit with this book, but are you pleased with the Featherbender's Advanced Fly Tying Techniques book? And was that always in your mind when you wrote the first one?
Always. And the whole idea behind excuse me, the whole idea behind these books is if we go back to 40 plus years ago, when I started dabbling with fly tying, the only thing I had was either very, very poor illustrations, drawn illustrations in magazines of how to tie a fly that were normally just line drawings, ink drawings, so there was no colour in them. And perhaps the odd book that had the most horrific black and white step-by-step photographs that were kind of out of focus, printed on incredibly poor paper. But And that was our resource, other than if you were lucky enough to have a class with somebody with a good tire. When I started tying trout flies, I started initially tying fully dressed salmon flies before I started fly fishing. But then I went on to fishing and I started tying trout flies. And these resources I had were poor, and I used to dissect flies with a scalpel just to see how they were tied. And I would try and remember, or I'd make small drawings as I removed the material and then try and reverse the drawings in order to build the fly. So I would buy flies, look at them, and if they worked, I would try and tie them. And initially, I started using sewing thread and a vise. A regular workshop vise. And feathers from wherever I got them. And then, today, there were the odd videos as well, especially from the United States. Scientific Anglers, I believe it was, that made some videos that were just phenomenal. The production was like Hollywood. And they were great, and they were VHS, or they might have even been Beta Max. And they were fabulous, but you had to rewind them and all that kind of stuff. Freeze frame them, the freeze frame would jump about, and of course, in a fly tying book, even though things have progressed phenomenally since then, in a fly tying book, when you look at step-by-step images, in between one image and the next, the preceding image and the following image, there is always something that you don't get that happens in between those two images. And from still images, you're not going to get, you're never, ever going to resolve that other than using a whole book on one pattern or a Flickr book. So the whole idea of, and now everything is online. You can find absolutely any pattern for any species online. And the whole idea with the book was with this marriage of printed matter and digital social media was to combine the two. So you can look at the book and still have that step-by-step to take your time and look at the images and tie the fly. But you can go to the video of me tying the same fly and see the techniques one-on-one. And if you're still struggling, the great thing about social media is you can send me a message and I'll try and help you out. And so it's a great way of the first Featherbenders fly tying techniques book was the absolutely first fly tying book to do this. And now number 2 is out, and I'm working on number 3 right now, which is just a book on deer hair.
Nice. Can you give us an idea of the sort of patterns? Because I've seen it, of course, and there's a lovely broad spectrum, but can you give us an idea of what's in there and what you're helping people with?
What there is what I'm trying to do with this, hence the name, the advanced techniques, is I'm using materials that we are absolutely used to using, but I've chosen the patterns in order to illustrate new techniques with these materials. So there's all trout patterns, there's sea trout patterns and trout patterns. Basically, that's it. That's what it is. And I'm using both. I'm using more synthetics in this book than the first one, although the majority of the materials are natural. It's a good mixture of synthetics. I'm using some foam, some rubber legs, braided backing. So it's a good mixture of both. But the focus is on the techniques, and they're all great fishing flies. It's very difficult to make that combination, and I choose a fly to go in the book. I tend to go towards to address several problems. All the flies have to be good fishing flies. I have to show techniques that are interesting that can be carried on to other patterns or used in a collection of your tying whenever you're tying. Techniques, I like to show techniques that people have problems with and reducing those problems to steps in order to conquer them. And if you follow the steps, you will conquer those patterns and those techniques. Like split wings, classic split wing, upwing dry flies is in this book. And I show you how to measure the slips, how to cut them, what parts to use, what parts not to use, how to mount them. And once you've done that a couple of times and you follow the instructions, and of course, if you're struggling, you go to the video and you can see exactly how I do it. And then you can go back to the book and take your time to tie the pattern yourself. So the whole idea behind all these books is to make, no matter how advanced or how new you are to fly tying, the whole idea is to make fly tying easier than ever before. And I really believe it's filled it's reached all the right positions to do that. It's everybody, the feedback I get from them, that people they've tried to tie that for 40 years and now they can do it. So it's a very, very positive response I've had back from people.
And for listeners as well, that, I was just, while you were saying that, I was thinking, having seen it as well, the way you described how you keep your tying station at shows, the notes are copious and are full of information, like you say. So as somebody who's looked at it from the outside and read it, there are so many hints and tips that are going to help. And it made me think that the book is pitched on many levels. So it could be for somebody who has been tying for a little bit. It could be for the improving tyer, but it could also be for the advanced tyer who has, and I'm somebody who that sort of kind of worked and have got on with it. But now there's a definitive, this is how you can do it and this is how it will look better. Was that in your mind to actually do that so that it ticked boxes for so many people on so many different levels? Because it strikes me that it does really well.
Well, again, the whole idea is to reach as many fly ties as possible, and also I try and make them as attractive as possible. That is very, very important for me. That is paramount to make it a book you will enjoy looking at, even if you don't tie flies.
Well, that's the really nice thing about it. I was going to come on to say that the accompanying photography as a result of your skills, not just with fly tie materials, but with a camera, makes it feel, to me, really contemporary and also a lovely mix, rather than, right, we're going from this pattern to the next pattern to the next pattern to the next pattern. Is beautifully broken up with really strong imagery as well.
Yeah, thank you. But that's my goal with everything I do. I try to go from the fonts that are used. I go through everything: the cover, the back cover, the page numbering, where every image is going to go, how it's going to look. So I work very much with the designer throughout the process, in order that it will be something that it's a thing of beauty to look at, and you think, oh wow, that's nice having that there. What lovely images. And, the full page images I do, still lives of each pattern, make it very different to other fly tying books as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's an absolute beauty, and I'm sure I probably asked you this before as well. Getting that list, is it like picking your ultimate football team? Do you have a clear idea in your mind of which patterns you want that show those techniques, but also are practical from a fishing standpoint too?
I try and make them a fine balance. They all have to fit a criteria. The first criteria is the techniques. So I try and show at least 3 advanced techniques in every pattern. And that's important. If you want to advance as a fly tyer and certainly up your game, it's very important. Like a painter, they say that you hear that it's often said when people viewed a Picasso or a Mondrian or a Rothko, or a child could have done that. Yeah, but it's so untrue. It is absolutely so untrue. When you think that these 3 painters know everything, absolutely everything about pigment, about linseed oil, about priming canvases, about mixing paint and colour and life drawing, and all of them could draw and paint so it would look like a photograph. But they chose not to. They chose to show us something that they themselves only had a vision of, and we were privileged in order to see their way of seeing things. They showed us how they saw things, and I try and show some of that in the fly tying. Everybody wants most fly tyers, I wouldn't say everybody, most fly tyers like their flies to look good. And when they're in a box, all lined up and neat, and like Andy Warhol soup tins, and I try and pervade that in what I do. I find it. Many people have said to me that it's impossible for me to tie a scruffy fly. I love scruffy flies; they fish phenomenally, but again, I'm very neat and OCD-ish. So that side, all I want to do basically is use my skills and my many years of fly tying in order to learn others to tie flies to their best ability.
Well, congratulations on the book, because you've certainly done that. There's a load of pages. There's a load to look through. I think it will help people get through winter by tying flies and imagining where they might use them during those long winter months. So I can only shout about it because I think it is absolutely fantastic. Barry, can you let people know where they can buy it, where it's available?
Sure. It's available from Merlin Unwin Books. That's easy enough to find online, and it's available on Amazon and in all good bookstores, I guess. It will be published in February in the United States by Skyhorse Publishing, who did the first book. And it will also be published in Japanese later in October, later in the year in 2025 by Flybito in Japan.
So there we go. This is where you can find it. Try and get it from the publisher if you're in the UK. That helps them. And I'm sure places like Kokibundu will have it in time as well. So if you're able to support these people direct, that would be absolutely fantastic from that point of view. Let's move on to something a little bit different, music. And there's a couple of things I'm going to ask you about the song for the playlist. But whilst you're tying, what do you do? Do you listen to music? Do you focus on the task at hand, or do you listen to anything else or watch anything while you're doing it? What's the process?
I listen and watch. I normally have the news on, or I listen to music all day long, the whole time when I'm tying and photographing in studio. Yeah, because I work alone, so I'm tying flies and photographing them, and I guess now about 30, 40 hours a week. So I would like to fish more, as we discussed earlier, but when I get into production, especially when I'm doing a book, I start doing it and then I think, oh, I should have done that, and I start again, and then it's a never-ending process, and I get enthusiastic and I crack on, and yeah. But I do listen to stuff. I listen to a lot of opera. I listen to a lot of reggae and a lot of ska. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds. I'm going to ask you for the song in a moment, but it just dawned on me that you said about the book that you're doing on deer hair. Does that mean this project is now at a different phase, that it's out? So does that mean now the focus, you've already starting to focus on the deer book, or deer hair book? Sorry, do you give yourself a little bit of a breather in between?
No, as I said, I can't really give myself a breather. If I give myself a breather, I'm not producing, and then I'm not working, and I'm not getting paid. So, you'll never be you'll never be rich from making fly tying books, but the uh, the accompanying resource that it gives, it pulls traffic to my website, to my YouTube channel, to my demos, to shows. So it's a part of the profile and package. So they're very, very important. And of course, everybody that buys them, or most of the people who buy them, appreciate them very much.
Nice. Fantastic. Now, let's move on to the songs themselves. And because of what you've just said to me as a huge ska and reggae fan, and you'll appreciate this, that I was in Dorchester and there was a vinyl shop, and in the front window, there was a Walt Jabsco, the two-tone man, but also there was a Trojan picture as well, which was fantastic. I meant to take a photo of it, forget. So for one time only, I would love a ska and reggae song for listeners, and also another song that I can add to the Fly Culture road trip playlist that you can listen to on Spotify.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you know, I have a background in the pop industry. I was a pop photographer while I lived in London. But for the reggae one, I can say anything whatsoever. You can make your own choice, anything whatsoever from Toots and My Tells.
Perfect.
And for my own personal one, Holidays in the Sun by the Sex Pistols.
There we go. Nice. Well, that will go onto the playlist. Toots and the Maytals, I'm probably going to go 5446. That's my number.
Absolutely brilliant. It's their anthem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the one I'll probably go for over Monkey Man. I'm trying to think what else, but
they're all brilliant.
They are.
I could never choose one over the other, so it's nice that you've done that.
Yeah, it might even be on there. 5446 might already been on there because I may have put it on there, but if not, I'm going to put that on there. They are wonderful choices, and how, Barry, can people, like you said, this is the wonderful thing about the modern world, that people can buy the book, they can listen to this, but also, as you've said, that they can interact with you as well and say either they bought the book and they've really enjoyed it, or they might need some help with something. But I know you have a large amount of people who follow you already, but if people don't, how can they connect with you from a website, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it may be? How do they find you?
The website and the YouTube channel are of the same name, which is the Featherbender. And you can find me on Instagram just as Barry Ord Clarke. And the way a lot of people use the YouTube channel and the website is if they're tying one of the patterns that I'm illustrating and they're having problems sourcing a material or with the technique or whatever, they just, on that certain pattern in the comments, they just send me a message. And it's the first thing I do every morning when I come back from the gym is answer all the questions on the YouTube channel. So it's within 24 hours generally.
And that's one of the lovely things about this is that people may have bought your books previously, but now they get a sense of you as a person as well. And I think that's really nice that they'll read the book knowing how you sound, what motivates you, what interests you. That's one of the cool things about modern life, isn't it?
It's extraordinary. It really is extraordinary. And people recognize me by my voice, which is even more extraordinary. So it's because they listen to it on the YouTube channel while they're tying, so they're not really. And I don't show myself on the YouTube channel. I just show my voice and tying the fly. But they hear my voice, and so it is a great resource. I get people coming to demos and shows everywhere I go, saying they've watched all the videos, they've read the books. Great to meet you, and it's lovely meeting these people that have been, following me and buying my books and for many years. So it's great. Not all the shows I do, I'm always meeting somebody new. So both young and old.
And it's lovely to take the time to tell people like Barry that I'm lucky in a small way that people send nice messages about the podcast. And I've had similar that people come up and may not know what I look like, but similarly recognize my voice. And I've had it a number of times where people come up and they say, "Are you Pete?" And I say, "Well, it depends. You're not from the Inland Revenue or anything." And then we can talk. And those things mean a hell of a lot as well on a completely different level, don't they?
Sure, absolutely. And I am very humbled by all the people that come to shows and meet me and say, and many of them, if they're tying at shows as well, I learn so much from them. They, all these shows and demos I visit, I'm learning stuff all the time. There are so many brilliant, innovative tyers out there that are coming up with stuff that I would never ever have imagined. So it's all that is just so great.
That's wonderful. Barry, as always, it's been wonderful to speak with you. Please stay in touch. I'm sorry you won't be at BFFI, so I won't be able to say hello to you in person. But listeners, just buy the book. You're not going to regret it. It is fantastic. You've got a very good idea of what's involved with it. There is a lot there that you're going to enjoy. But Barry, I would love to say a huge thank you for talking with me again on the podcast today.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. Lovely talking to you. And I hope we do it again soon.
I'm sure we will. We'll talk about the deer book as well. I'm sure deer hair book as well. But everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this chat as much as me. And as always, there'll never be any charge for these. I hope you just keep on enjoying them, and there'll be some more very, very soon. Thanks for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.